Angela and Alexis, welcome to the Women in Business Impact Lab podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to be with both of you today. And today we have Alexis Palmer joining us as our illustrious guest. I'm super excited, Alexis, to be able to have a nice conversation with you around navigating higher education leadership as a female. And Alexis and I go way back. In fact, when I was a brand new Green faculty member at Utah Valley University, I literally think it was my first week. I went to the new faculty convocation, and Alexis was tabling outside of the UVU ballroom talking about the center or the Volunteer and Service Learning Center. And that's when we got connected. And ever since, we've been close and worked together on all sorts of things. So it's been fun to see Alexis firsthand go through a lot of her leadership journey, and as she's moved through her career over the last 14 plus years. And of course, we're again joined by Dr. or soon to be Dr. Angela Schill, who is co-hosting this episode with me. Alexis, as we get started, I'm just going to share your bio with everybody. Alexis Palmer joined the Utah Valley University in 2004 and has served in a variety of roles. She has been in her current role as Associate Vice President of Student Life and Dean of Students since 2014. Her motivation for working in student affairs began when she was a resident assistant at Idaho State University. The RA experience was transformational and created the foundation of her passion for engaging women in leadership, advancing inclusion initiatives, and student development. She graduated with her bachelor's in elementary education from Boise State University, her master's in youth and family recreation from Brigham Young University, and she received an education doctorate from Grand Canyon University in organizational leadership and development. Her dissertation was a phenomenological study exploring the lived experiences of non-LDS employees who work in a predominantly LDS environment. Again, a pleasure to have you, Alexis. Anything else you would like to share with us by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
Sure, thank you. I'm excited to be here. And one thing I was just going to mention is the whole reason I got a doctorate is so that my daughter in her phone contacts, my 16-year-old, has me under as Dr. Palmer. So whenever the phone rings, it says Dr. Palmer, and I love it. I love that for her. That's what she calls me. Everyone else can call me Alexis, but she has to call me Dr. Palmer. But no, I was also going to just mention, outside of my work world, I do have 3 daughters, 2 teenagers, and then a preteen. So our life is very full and busy with them. And I'm very active in the food allergy world. Actually, our oldest daughter has a severe peanut allergy, and I'm really passionate about the intersection of mental health and food allergies. So I work closely with the Utah Food Allergy Network. I'm actually the treasurer for our Utah Food Allergy Network, and work a lot in policy and advocacy related to laws focused on food allergy safety, and that intersection that a lot of kids have with mental health and with their food allergy combined together. So that's another passion of mine that I get to engage in.
That's
very
amazing.
cool. And I don't know, Alexis, how you got your daughter to refer to you as doctor.
Wow.
My children definitely do not call me doctor, and they definitely call me other less spectacular things on a regular basis. So that's fantastic.
Yeah,
I
proud
think
of that one thing.
yeah, I think Angela and Alexis, I think you both know that my wife Jackie finished her doctorate about a year and a half ago, and so now our claim to fame is that we are Doctors Westover, and we love it when people introduce us as Doctors Westover. Otherwise, we just prefer our first names, John and Jackie.
I like the Doctors Westover. I'm going to go with that.
Cool. Me too. That's amazing. Alexis, I just have a couple of questions for you. You've been at UVU for almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
You've built some amazing roles as you've I want to say gone up the ladder, I'm assuming, and in leadership roles. And I'm just wondering, what are some of the challenges that you've faced as you've navigated through higher education in all of the various leadership positions as a female? What has that been like for you?
I think a couple of things. First, I do want to say that for me specifically, my experience in navigating higher ed in a career, I really owe a lot of it to my sponsors. So I've had incredible mentors and sponsors who have tapped me for opportunities that have helped further my career. So whether it was Dr. Brian Birch, who encouraged me to apply for the community and continuing ed position, even though I didn't feel like I was qualified or I had the experience. I had been the director of our Volunteer and Service Learning Center, or the Center for Service Learning, for about 8.5 years. And he reached out to me and tapped me and encouraged me. And I did, I took that risk. Or when the Dean of Students position opened up 9 years ago. And again, it wasn't something I was looking at. And there were many people who reached out to me and encouraged me, tapped me, and helped me see that that was something that I could do. So there were a lot of others that paved the way for me, but were also advocates and sponsors, both female and male. Faculty, non-faculty, it was all over the place. And so that's something that I think has helped me navigate my career in higher ed, is to have really meaningful sponsors and mentors in my life. And all of them are still central to the work that I do today. So I think that's one way I've been able to navigate higher ed. I think the other aspect of what I've been able to do with navigating, and I don't know if it's different anywhere else, right? My career is in higher education. That's the industry I've chosen to be in for a variety of reasons. I'm very passionate about education and the impact it can make on a community. So it's something I wanted to be a part of, as well as student development. That's something else that I'm very passionate about. So I don't know outside of higher ed what it's like. But as I've also navigated higher ed, a few things that I've been able to do that I think have helped, in addition to those mentors and sponsors. And one of them is just giving yourself freedom to stop apologizing. That is something I work very closely with my team on, especially my female leaders. I have one director who banks basically a case of Diet Coke for me. And then every time she apologizes, I'm like, you have 20 sorries left. And listen, you got 20 sorries left, and after that, you're done. No more sorries. Because you really need to be who you are and you need to own it. And so that freedom from apologizing was really transformational. Gosh, it was probably about 7 years ago, when I went to a Women's Leadership Institute focused on higher ed, and where one of the speakers really talked about that. You know, when you walk into a room and you bump into someone, the first thing you say is, "Oh, I'm sorry." No, I'm not. No, I'm not sorry for taking up space. I'm not going to apologize anymore for taking space. I can say, "Excuse me," but sorry is for doing something wrong. And the women around me are constantly apologizing and saying sorry, whether that's apologizing for taking up space, and that could be physical space, it could be mental space, giving an idea and then apologizing after it. I'm done with that. And so that's something that has helped me navigate as a female in higher ed, whole self to work and being who you are and owning that. The other one is, I just have two more, but be the Leslie Jones of your crew, of your area. I don't know, which Olympics was it? I was gonna look it up right before because I've forgotten. It was can't remember which. I mean, it's been probably like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Leslie Jones, who's a comedian, was so passionate about the Olympics in the USA. And there are these great clips of watching her cheering on the rowing team and cheering on the swimming team. And just, she was their champion. And I was like, I want a Leslie Jones in my life. And so really just trying to work with my team and the people that I interact with, and creating that supportive culture providing positive social cues for other women around me. So I'm passionate about that. I don't live to work, I work to live. And I want other people around me to not feel pressured that when they go home and they're spending time doing the things that they enjoy doing, that bring them joy, that bring them passion, that help alleviate that burnout, they don't need to be looking at email. They don't need to be responding to work-related issues. I want them to take lunch. I want them to feel like they have some flexibility, because I need them to be their best self. And, really empower other women. Empowered women empower other women, right? And so that's kind of how I view myself, as wanting to be that Leslie Jones of the crew that I work with. And then the third one, really in higher ed, this is a significant one, at least for me. It's just to clear out all the clutter. There is so much noise going on, so many different stakeholders, and you have to be able to recognize what that noise is, recognize where you need to say no so that you can focus your priorities and get back to the basics. And so for me, my focus is overall student development and well-being. So if it doesn't pertain to student well-being, and it might be so important and amazing, but I'm going to have to say no to it, because my focus is making sure the students have their needs met so that they can be successful. And so I think clearing out that clutter is really key. And as women, it's hard to say no. But that's also something that you have to be able to say no, and you shouldn't have to apologize for saying no, whether that's taking on an additional assignment that will have a negative impact potentially on all your other workload, that down the road is not necessarily going to be the most beneficial, to being in a meeting and being asked to take notes when that's not your role. So it's okay to say no, clear out that clutter, and stop apologizing. So those are, I guess, 3 personal things that have kind of helped me, but then that one big thing was having mentors and sponsors in my life to help me move along.
To me, it sounds like those are quite universal. I think
Yeah.
as applicable as it is in higher ed, I think that across the board sounds like incredible advice. Incredible.
Yeah, I think I think any organization you're in and you're trying to navigate, it's probably pretty common. The people are just different. The problems might be a little bit different, the nuances, the complexities, but overall the basic foundational issues are the same.
Alexis, excuse me. Can I ask you, just kind of double click on the boundary setting that you were just talking about? I think that's a challenge for a lot of people. I know saying no has always been something that I've not been very good at. But if you haven't noticed, I am a dude, so it's different for me than it is for you. And I know if it's been hard for me, I imagine it's something that you've had to wrestle with as well. How do you disrupt that tendency to just say yes to everything, and to sacrifice your personal boundaries, to do things that, like you said, they may be things you believe in, they may be important things, but they may not directly fit with your stewardship or what your core responsibilities are. How do you start that if you're stuck, like many of us are, caught in a trap of always saying yes to everything?
Yeah, sure. And I absolutely am also in that trap. And so as much as I would love to say I'm great at this all the time, I'm always having to kind of pivot and correct that. And I also, want to recognize I have some privilege with being at UVU for 19 years. I know the organization. I also am a white cisgender female. So I have my BIPOC colleagues may have a very different experience than I do when I'm able to say no. So I do want to just put that out there, that because I've worked here for so long and know the organization, I feel like I have a little bit more privilege than other people do. So for me, I think there are ways. It's how you say no. So it's let me think about this. And then I talk to my supervisor and say, if I'm going to take this on, I have to put this on the back burner. And as long as you're okay with that, and understand those unintended consequences that might come from putting this other project on the back burner, then okay, maybe it's okay to say yes to this, but something else is going to have to give. Or if it's a partnership I want to start with another colleague or department, I may need to weigh that into saying yes versus saying no. If I'm trying to try something new to help me personally or professionally, that weighs into saying yes versus saying no. But I definitely think the older I have gotten in my years, in my middle-aged years, there are a lot of things that aren't emergencies. In my world, what I work with, I know what emergencies are. And an emergency is dealing with some pretty horrific things that students have experienced. So most of the times, the requests that you get don't fall in that category, and that's just a different perspective I have than probably other people do about where you need to put your energy and time. And as much as I love UVU, your job will never love you back. That was some advice I actually got from NASP, our National Association for Student Affairs Professionals. There's a podcast that I was listening to, and a very well-respected VP from who's been in the field for decades and decades talked about that. Your job will never love you back. It just won't. And so I have to make sure that I'm feeding my soul and what brings me joy. And again, I really appreciate my job and the people I work with, but I don't love it 24/7. So I'm going to have those boundaries.
And then that's amazing. Just, I think boundaries is always something that I'm working on, and kind of also when you're saying no to something, letting go of the guilt that comes with that. And I think that that kind of connects to what you were talking about with not apologizing to other people, but also not needing to do that for yourself. Have your back when you say no and not let it haunt you later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard to learn. I mean, I think we're conditioned from a very early age to please others, to put others' needs first before your own. And so there's some cultural things with that. So yeah, you have to something you have to definitely work through. And so with my daughters, I teach them when they start saying sorry for things like giving their opinion. I'm like, no, wait, stop saying sorry. We're done with that. To if a friend asks them to do something and they just don't want to do it, just say no. I don't want to go do that, instead of coming up with some other story about why you don't want to go and do something.
And kind of tacking onto that a little bit with your daughters and then in your career as well, finding your voice. And I think this is all connected. We're just kind of building here, but finding your voice as a female in higher education, as a female in the world. What have you done, or what do you suggest, and how do you help other people that you're mentoring to do that?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting complexities with finding your voice as a female in higher ed. And one of them is that academic component. So I'm a student affairs professional. I did not go the academic route. And part of me, felt like I needed to get a doctorate so that my academic colleagues would hear me. So I not only was struggling with being a female, being a woman in the workplace and navigating that aspect, but on top of that, not having academic credentials that academics felt like I should have to be able to be at the table and to be able to share that voice. So that was difficult. And I don't necessarily think that I am any more that I'm better at my job because of my doctorate, or that I have more insightful comments because of my doctorate. I don't think that has changed, but I think academic people probably have more, will, those letters behind my name, they might listen to me a little bit more than if I didn't have those letters. So that was part of the issue that I had to navigate, which can be frustrating. And then, having that seat at the table, it's not just like being at the table. I remember listening to one speaker talk about, like, just bring your folding chair. If there's not even a seat for you at the table, you just bring that folding chair and you just bust in and you start engaging in that conversation. So one thing though is like, if I was, at the table in a conversation, feeling like I'm not being heard, is that's when I work really closely with your allies, or those sponsors in your life, and to help them say what needs to be said if people aren't hearing you. And again, now I've been at the institution for 19 years. I have a lot of institutional knowledge, and I don't find myself in those situations very often anymore. But now I see my colleagues, those who are just starting out their career, and seeing them going through the same thing of that. So it makes me pause and make sure that I'm letting those voices, especially our BIPOC voices, make sure that they're at the table. And it's not just a folding chair, it's a real chair, and time is given and people are stopping and listening to what's being said.
So I have a question for you. Again, as the resident dude on the call, I'm wondering what advice you would have for other women in the audience who are looking, for ways to navigate higher ed careers, in trying to develop relationships with allies and sponsors and mentors. And what advice would you have for any male listeners who are, want to be an ally, but aren't really quite sure how to navigate that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to start with that second question, who want to be an ally and not sure how to start that. I think you just start having a conversation with your colleagues and ask them what are the barriers that you're facing in the workplace. For many women in academics especially, you'll start to hear women talk about the academic mental workload that they take on, that their male colleagues don't necessarily experience. So that can be one of those conversation starters. And then what can you do to help remove that barrier? So if you're sitting in a meeting and assignments are being divvied out and the female is getting all the assignments, which I have seen, I have experienced, stop and volunteer yourself to take on something, or ask, why do we constantly give so and so all of this specific workload and the rest of us walk away with nothing that we have to do? So I think that that's one way that our male allies can stand up and be a part of that. I've challenged my direct reports who are male, to, when they're in meetings and when they're working with their teams, to really stop and look at the division of workload that's happening within their own departments, and what can they do to adjust that. So for the allies, that's what at least the allies I've worked with, that has been the most helpful for me personally, but that I've also seen some really positive impacts from across campus. And John, I absolutely consider you one of the most amazing allies that we have on campus to help with that. So thank you. And what was the first part of the question? I've already forgot that. Sorry.
Good question. Now I have to remember myself. It was something to the effect of, for the female audience, how can they effectively start to build their network of mentors and sponsors and allies as they're navigating their career?
Well, actually one formal thing you can do, which is pretty great. In the state of Utah, specifically, I work at Utah Valley University, so I'm in the state of Utah. We actually have a Utah Women's Higher Education Network, which is a substantial group of women from across the state who work at various colleges and universities who are involved in this. There is a board that's made up of women from all across the state. They put on conferences and events, monthly webinars. That's a great way to just start dipping your toe into how to navigate higher ed as a female leader. And then on UVU, we have our own chapter. So there's a UN chapter that you can also get involved with. So that's within the state of Utah, which is really, really a great way. And then within higher ed in general, for me, the most transformational thing that I did was I went to a Women's Leadership Institute that was focused for higher ed professionals. And I have a notebook full from, again, years ago that completely changed the way that I viewed myself as a human, how I viewed myself as a professional in the work that I do. That gave me the confidence to do my job. I didn't see myself as a dean of students, as an associate VP. And that conference, having others around me, hearing from VPs and presidents about the concerns that they had, feeling inadequate, having the imposter syndrome that I know the podcast has talked about before. Being around other people who were experiencing that was really transformational for me. And then I think finally, the last thing is just don't ever doubt bringing your full self to work. Bring who you are. Bring everything that you have to offer, because that is what creates the uniqueness of each of our departments, of our thought patterns. And I don't want those voices to ever be squashed. And so we need empowered women to empower women. And that's what I hope we see more of.
Oh, that's so powerful, Alexis. I feel like you're where you should be in your career as someone who can have that message. It's a beautiful message. I was going to ask you, do you have any kind of like last piece of insight to share? And I feel like you just did that, but I don't know if you have anything else. I just feel like students, women, leaders are, this is just such great advice for what you're passing on to the people that you influence at UVU and listeners to this podcast and me personally.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. I think I just will maybe end with a quick experience that happened to me. Another, lesson that I learned. A few years ago, I was traveling with another colleague and we were presenting on how interfaith work can actually happen on campuses. And we were at a university in Southern California. And my colleague is an exceptional presenter. And you just walk away every time you hear him just feeling very motivated. And he did just a great job with this presentation. And I had to go after him. And the first thing I said when I got up was, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not this person. I'm so sorry that my like this person, like he has he's so great with like also the visuals, and mine aren't the best, and I'm so sorry." And it kept going. And I will never forget this. A vice president from this university was in the audience, and she came up to me afterwards. She's actually the vice president of their like institutional advancement. And she came up to after me afterwards and she said, can I talk to you? And I said, yeah. She's like, we go on a walk? Sure. And for about an hour, she took me on a walk and talked to me and basically called me out and said, Alexis, why did you do that? Who you are is enough. You being up there was enough. Your presentation was enough. You did not need to qualify anything. You did not need to apologize for anything. You bring it, you own it. Don't ever apologize for anything or for going after a male in a presentation. And that has stuck with me. I still stay in contact with her, and every so often I tell her, I almost apologized today, and then I remembered what you said to me. But that was really transformational for me. And she didn't know me. She didn't have to take the time to do that, but she did. And that is something I'll forever be grateful for. And if you don't have a second thought, if you can reach out to someone and take them to the side and say, you know what? Stop. Don't be apologizing. You don't need to do that. You are amazing with what you're doing right now. That spoke a lot to me. And so I think that I want people to just reach out and again, empowered women empower women. And we need more of that.
Alexis, thank you so much. Our time is almost gone, but we just want to, again, we appreciate you being here with us. Really quickly, how can people get connected with you if they want to talk more?
Probably the best thing to do is you can find me on LinkedIn, Alexis Palmer. That's a great way to reach me.
Wonderful. We encourage our audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Alexis is doing and what she can do for you. And as always, we hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And we hope you all have a great week.